Alright, so obviously by this here, I've only been playing enough basically to do the dailies, especially with this gold season. But I have a crazy deck for you today. 3 wins in a row here, and then if I go over into the Duelist Cup match history, 3 wins in a row here, so that makes 6 wins in a row with this insane deck. This deck I made kind of just on a whim as a casual deck, not really expecting it to be as good as it's ended up being. But it is Scraps, Kashtira, and Orcust all just shoved into the same deck together. So just one of the Kurikara here seems kind of strange, I know, especially because I do have more Kurikaras. But with this, one of the strengths of this deck is Small World. There is a Small World line into every monster. For Kurikara, you cannot actually get to it through Jet Synchron or Rise Heart as the second card that you're revealing from your deck. You have to go through Ash Blossom. But because the Rise Heart is searchable, especially if you have a hand where you're like special summon Fenrir effect, I get to search, you can add a Rise Heart to your hand and then Small World it off through Ash Blossom into Kurikara, if that's the appropriate thing to deal with your opponent's board, especially if your opponent is also on Kashtira. So like say your opponent has a full Kashtira board, you special the Fenrir, activate Fenrir to search Rise Heart, all of your opponent's Kashtiras go off, you can go Small World, get the Rise Heart banished, send off an Ash from deck, add Kurikara, wipe the opponent's board, right? And that's pretty much the situation that it's like for. But then a problem with this deck is that the Orcust cards and the Kashtiras, in particular Theosis and Riseheart, do not work well together because the Kashtiras lock you into Xyz and the Orcus lock you into Darks. So obviously those don't work too well together. Theosis is fine. Riseheart, though, is a bit of a problem and is more so a Small World bridge in here than might be expected. Because it does kind of get you to a lot of things. Pretty much any card in the deck, Divine Carnate really kind of aside, can get you into Scrap Raptor, right? We've got a lot of Earths. You can go from an extra max C in hand through a Kamungus or a Fenrir in deck into the Scrap Raptor because they're all Earths and don't have anything else in common. Sorry, no, you can't Fenrir and Kamungus. You can go Raiden, Fenrir, Raptor is what you can do. But you can also, if you need to use the Kamungus as the center line, use the Scareclaw Cache from deck, and then get from deck or hand, and then get into Raptor there. But yeah, you can really sculpt your hands very, very well in this deck, which I've found to be a really great strength here. And with the scrap line, you can go into Coral Dragon and then maybe get a pop there, and then turn Coral Dragon into Shen Shen, which gets you a draw, but also creates end boards where you have a Shen Shen and a Rise Heart, Galatea with a negate, or potentially a Masquerena to go into Underworld Goddess, or like Appaloosa. Sometimes the end board will have IP Masquerena with a Lib that you can use to go into Appo or Underworld Goddess on the opponent's turn. There's all kinds of crazy nonsense that can be done in this deck, and I'm not gonna do a combo guide here. Make this thing too long. We're at 4 minutes, so let's go ahead and get into a replay here. This one is going to be a replay against a Dragon Link player who's going first and just setting up their whole board. I'm going to speed it up. so that we're not sitting here forever as they combo and as I combo, since we both can take quite a long time on some of these turns. So my hand here is interesting. It's pretty good, but I have drawn Hardporter. So with the deck profile, I'm playing both Jet Synchron and Crystron Rosenix, and a lot of people would want to cut one of those, I feel like. But I also feel like it is important to have both, because you'll have hands that don't have an Orcust in it, you don't have anything you want to discard, and so Rosenix is better. But then you have hands where, like this one, where you do want to discard. And so having the Jet Synchron's better. Also, the Jet Synchron is a tuner. The Rosenix is not. Luckily, against Bestials here, neither of them is a dark, which is great because that means that you can go for the Recycler, get your second monster onto your board, so that you can actually do your Link Summon, and there aren't any darks in that line except for World Wand, but especially through Jet Synchron if you're discarding an Orcust here, and unfortunately that random selection has hit the Recycler, which is kind of the worst card in this hand for it to have hit, but because that means that I do not have access to my scrap lines now. But the chances of drawing, and I will draw, the chances of drawing back into the scrap line are extremely high, so I say the worst card for it to hit, but kinda not. Here's the Fossil Dig. So I'm going to Kaiju over the negate there, throw down the Unicorn. Unicorn gets negated. I'm going to Triple Tactics, steal the Boral, and get ashed on the Fossil Dig. Now this puts me in a bad situation where I have to normal summon the Heart Horror, get hit with the Forbidden Droplets so the Borderland can't get over the Zombie Vampire, and then I will link those off into Galatea, because that is one of the outs that exists to Borderland Dragon, is just stealing it and linking it off into a Link 2. So here I'm going to use the World Wand, summon Orchestrated Nightmare, and then I'm going to get to Babel and Ding Girsu. And then with the two remaining Orcusts, the non-Xyz Orcusts on my field, I'm going to link those off into IP Masquerena and end turn. And the reason for Masquerena is going to become apparent very soon. Now it's going to be very important. This Unicorn banish here. My opponent's going to summon Noctovision, so I'm going to banish the Dissipator. Noctovision being a 7 means that my opponent can very easily get into Dissipator. But here I force him to go into the Boral Savage Dragon, which lets me link that off into Underworld Goddess before they get into gate, and now my opponent kind of doesn't have a board, because their options were Dissipator or Boral Savage, so by banishing the Dissipator, I can make them go for the Savage, which doesn't out IP on the moment that it hits the board. Sorry about my chair, it's very squeaky. Yeah, so here my opponent's kind of not able to put together any kind of a board, also because they don't have Dissipator, they can't use this hot red for anything, and it just dies at the end of the turn. So I've drawn Golem, worst draw in the deck, but it's fine, I can put the Galatea back. Now here's what I like about playing more Orcusts in my deck than I'm playing right now, is I can't add any card advantage through the Galatea, but it's okay. I do have an Omni Negate through Crescendo, and the Grave Negate with Underworld Goddess. So nobody reads Galatea and knows that she can't be attacked over in battle if she's linked to another monster. So I'm going to Crescendo there. I should have Crescendoed the summon of the Bestial there, because that would have prevented all of this. That would have prevented seals from hitting the board and whatnot. Underworld Goddess is unaffected by, or not unaffected, she can't be targeted by activated effects, so they have to return the Heart Horror there. Returning the Galatea would make sense as well, and I think would have been the correct play, but that's kind of, my opponent doesn't know what's in my hand, they don't know exactly what I would have gone and done with that. So keeping the Harpor out of the grave does make sense, and we have now come to a position where my opponent has a 3000 wall and I just got a 3000 attacker. I've drawn my second golem, which really sucks. I go for Babel sending me Harpor, which I thought was going to be great and really get me going. But no, that's gotten banished by Called by the Grave, but I've still got Babel back in hand, and it has gotten rid of Called by, so that is going to be good for my scrap line later on, and that's kind of one of the things that the Orcust line is doing in here, is that they are darks. You can send them to the graveyard, they can get Bestials out of the hand, catch Called by the Graves, and free things up for the scrap line, which is really actually what's being used to get to game here. So here I don't have any golems in deck, which makes it really awkward, and I have to pop the Wyvern. But I can summon the Raptor from deck that I didn't have access to, get into Scrap Twin, and then start doing Orcust things just to get Harpor on the field and attack for game. I'm not playing a second Galatea, so I won't be able to go into her there. Could go into her in the Scrap Recycler zone otherwise. But yeah, I'm not playing the extended Orcust line. So I'm going to give one more view of the deck, and that was a game where because the Recycler was put back and the Fossil Dig was negated, didn't actually end up opening too well. Aside from just having the triple tack. But yeah, here's the deck one more time. Again, the theory of this deck is just small world into everything. Didn't even see small world in that example game there, and I drew both golems, which is terrible, but I kind of wanted to show also a line where you do have a golem in hand that's a little bit more awkward than the normal lines. The normal lines I've shown before in Scrap Orcust videos, so whatever on that. But one of the very, very nice things about this deck, I mentioned it earlier, but is that you can say I have opened Ogre, Raptor, and like not really anything else aside from stuff to maybe reduce the number of interaction points that I have to fight through. I can go special summon Ogre, add preparations, or maybe it's a unicorn and I'm trying to add Theosis, whatever it is. Summon Raptor or Recycler, and it gets negated. I can just link those off into Scrap Wyvern and go for the scrap line, which gets me into the Orcust. So I can do Orcust thing. I can just pivot off of Kashtira and do Orcust things. Like, let's say I were to summon a unicorn. The unicorn gets negated. I summon a scrap. The scrap gets negated. I can then still go off into the scrap line, get into the Orcust line. And then alternatively, I can have a unicorn on field add a Theosis to my hand, and if everything else is getting negated, I'm not able to get through the interaction points on everything else, I still combo off and fight through a bunch of my opponent's interactions, and then just activate Theosis and do normal Kashtira things if that becomes the situation, and that's how that's kind of been going, especially against Sword Soul and decks like that. But we are past 10 minutes now, so I am going to call it here. Not that I'm trying to get to 10 minutes, but that is a time that is plenty long for this. So yeah, I've just not been uploading because I've not been playing very much. Just like kind of enough to do the dailies. But here's a crazy weird deck.